Okay, just to recap, the Ethiopian king has been visited by the tribe of the fish eaters, who are their representatives of the Persian king, Cambyses. They bear gifts, but the Ethiopian king has seen through this disguise. They're not bona fide diplomats; they are spies. But having seen through their deceit, and the Ethiopian king is still interested in looking at these gifts. So what does he do? So labone is our first word. Now you know lambano, I take. This is the aorist participle. It's something like, we would say, picking up. Picking up, now it's tohema, it's the clothing. You might call it a robe, you might just call it clothing. Picking up the clothing, the purple clothing, this is the word for purple. Notice the repetition of the article, tohema, to porphuron. He asked, aeroman is a strong aorist, he asked what it was and how it had been made. It's poieo, I do or I make. And then you can see a genitive absolute. It's fairly obvious. A pontone, de tone, ichthyophagone, the genitive plural ending there, own. And when the fish eaters said, apone is obviously from Lego, I say. When the fish eaters said the truth about the purple and about the dye, that's dye of course, how does the king react? Well, he said, this is Fermi, I say, this is the aorist, he said. Now unfortunately you haven't done this construction yet. It's probably the most important construction in Greek, and in the normal course of events, in a non-virus world, we would have done this construction by now. It's called the accusative and infinitive. And you can see the accusative here, tous anthropous, and here's the infinitive, enai, which you know, to be. So literally, he said the men to be, and here's the adjective, doloros, fake, false. Now, we're not going to say he said the men to be, we're going to say he said that the men were fake. And he said that their clothes were fake. Now, so when the fish eaters told the truth about the purple and the dye, the king said that the men, meaning the Persians were fake and their clothes were fake. Now what the king is doing here is, in actual fact, he's reflecting typical Greek anti-Persian prejudice. The Greeks regarded the Persian court as, around the king, as a sort of den of luxury and vice, and they thought that fancy Persian clothes and fancy Persian perfumes were effeminate. In this case, I suppose it's the idea that the dye, this purple dye, masks the original colour of the cloth, and thus to the king, it's a deceit. It's fake. It's not the real McCoy. Notice how Herodotus has very strongly emphasised the adjective doloros, fake. Can you see? First of all, it's repeated, dolorous here at the beginning of the line, and dolora here at the end of the line. And each time it appears first word in the clause. Fake the men, fake their clothes, he said. So it's quite rhetorical, this repetition, and this position at the beginning of each clause. The first word position is very emphatic. Secondly, deuteron. You'll see down here, guys, in actual fact, you've got triton, which is thirdly. So secondly, he asked Eratosth about the golden necklace. This is the peri-alkenion. Your alkan is your neck, and what is a peri-alkenion is something that goes around the neck. And about the bracelets. Now these are gold, if you remember. Now we have to remember that Herodotus is portraying Ethiopian society as a utopia. And in this utopian society, gold is no more valuable than copper or even terracotta. Gold is obviously a sort of symbol of wealth, but it's also connected with the ideas of greed and corruption. And since greed and corruption are absent from this utopian society, gold just has no value there at all. So the king is not impressed by the fact that by this gold at all. So secondly then, he asked about the golden necklace and about the bracelets. Now again we have a genitive absolute. The verb isn't apontone here, it's exegeomai, which is to explain. It's where we get our word exegesis from, which you might have heard of. It's to explain. And when the fish eaters explained, what's the king's reaction here? Well, here's the reaction. First word, he laughed, gelao. It's interesting actually, this laughter here is in actual fact the laughter of contempt. The king, remember, has seen through the fact that these fish eaters are spies, not diplomats, and he's almost he's taking the piss. And we'll see later on in the next section that he finds more amusement from these Persian gifts. So he laughed. The king laughed, and this is the verb nomidsto, thinking, and thinking that. And here we have the aconymph again. Autar is the neuter accusative, einai is the infinitive, and thinking them to be, thinking that they were. Now, the Old English word we use here is fetters, F-E-T-T-E-R-S. Now, it's probably not a word you know. By fetters, they mean handcuffs, and what would be a neck version of a handcuff? A neck cuff, I suppose. You think those images of gangs of African slaves tied together by with iron collars around their necks. That's the image you need to keep in your mind here. The king laughed, and thinking that they were handcuffs and neck cuffs, he said that with them there were fetters more strong than these. Now, so these golden ornaments are obviously very delicately made and rather thin, I suppose, and because the king thinks that they are handcuffs, he says, well, they're not very strong, are they? They're going to hold nobody back. Thirdly, Triton. He asked about the perfume, or the myrrh, okay? And when they, this is the fish eaters, said, or explained, about the manufacture and anointing, now it's an interesting word, alepsis, the perfume would be infused into some sort of oil, olive oil, and then it would be applied to the skin, and this was in actual fact the way that perfume was applied And I suppose maybe application might be a better translation here of alepsis. And when they explained about the manufacture and the application of the perfume, he said the same word. Now, I think I'm probably going to say he pronounced the same judgment which he had made about the clothing, i.e. This is fake too. It's all about deceit and pretense. Now, hose de. We must translate this de here, which is often isn't very strong and can often be left untranslated. But here it is. It must be translated. It's a but. But this is a use of hose which we've had before, meaning when. But when he came to the wine and ascertained, Pynthanomai, and ascertained the making, the manufacture of it, this is the reaction of the king. Now, Hyper airspace, he's delighted with the drink, topoma. But in fact, notice this hyper airspace. It's hyper. Notice the prefix hyper. He's not just delighted. He's extremely pleased, and that's the force of the prefix there in hyper airspace. Extremely pleased with this drink. The king asked. Now it's aeroman again, but in fact, can you see there's a prefix on aeroman too? It's ep. Now this ep prefix means to ask in addition. He's asked about the wine, and he likes the wine, and then he asks in addition, and I suppose it's a natural connection. Once he discovers what they drink, he wants to know what they eat, and that's his next question. He asked in addition what the Persians ate. You know the noun in Greek sitos, meaning food. Well, this is the verb siteomai. What the Persians ate, and here's his next question: what time? Makrotatos, superlative. What was the longest time a Persian man lived? He wants to know what was the longest time a Persian man might live. So, what did the fish eaters reply? This is the fish eaters, hoide, and here's the verb ephasan. They said that they ate, sitesta infinitive, they ate bread. This is the word for bread, ton arton. And they said that they ate bread. Having explained, we've had this verb before, exegeomai, having explained the cultivation of wheat. This is the word for wheat, puros. Now, we'll have to bear in mind here that the cultivation of wheat involved fertilising the soil every year. I suppose farmers still do it. At the end of the year they will fertilise their soil. And what they use to fertilise their soil is, in actual fact, is manure, which is essentially animal dung. And the king is going to pick up on that in a minute, as you'll see. But that's when they explain the manufacture, the growth, the cultivation, of wheat. That's what they're explaining. We fertilise our soil with animal dung, and then we grow our crops in it. So having explained, first of all they explain what they ate, and then they answer the second question. Here's the number, ogdo ekonta, which is Greek for 80. And they said that 80 years were appointed to man, dative, as the longest span of life, genitive. So, they said that they ate bread and explained the cultivation of wheat. And then they said that 80 years were appointed to man as the longest span of life. Now, how does the king react? So pros tauta, meaning, I suppose, in response to this. It's not the usual meaning of pros, as you know, but that's what it means here. In response to this, the Ethiopian said that he was surprised, thou madst, you know, but he was not surprised at all, Uden. He said that he wasn't surprised at all if they lived a few years, only a few years, eating kopros, dung. Now that is the word kopros for animal dung. And the king, again, in a sense, I mean, he's taking the piss again. I'm not surprised you only live such few years compared to the 120 years that Ethiopians live, if you feed on animal dung. So this is, again, the Ethiopian king is having fun at the expense of the Persians. For, he said, now remember this particle an. Whenever you see an, it's going to be translated as would. It's part of a conditional, and here's the if clause coming up in the second half of the sentence. For he said they, here's the accusative, would not, here's the negative, be able, here's the infinitive, to live so many years. We have to understand the word years there. For he said that they would not be able to live so many years. This is if not a mare, but we can say unless. Unless is the same as if not. I think he said that they wouldn't be able to live so many years, even 80 years, if they did not refresh themselves, anapharo, if they did not refresh themselves with the drink. And then in brackets, Herodotus explains, meaning the wine. So he's obviously, it's the only thing he's impressed with, the wine. And then what's our last sentence? For, now in actual fact, yes, this is an interesting verb, hetarmai. It means to be, it's the infinitive here, and it's another accusative infinitive. Here's the accusative, herautus, and here's the infinitive, hertastai at the end. And it means to be defeated on the battlefield, but it also means to be inferior to, and the king actually admits here that this is the one way in which the Persians have the better of the Ethiopians. He likes their wine. For he said that they were inferior to the Persians, or defeated by the Persians, in this thing. I think we'd probably say in this alone, namely this Persian wine. They were defeated by the Persians, or we would probably say inferior to the Persians.